week, the first budget slashed several expenditures of the previous governments. Hyderabad gets prime share in Telangana budget. Metro extension and the Musi river cleansing is top priority. Hyderabad's top share revised. NEET results are out. Results as per the Supreme Court order. Chandrababu declared white paper on law and order, says no one will be spared. CM versus Governor Cold War in West Bengal is out on the occasion of the new TMC employees swearing. National and financial capitals have been drenched. Schools and colleges shut down in Mumbai. Hello, namaskar, this is CVR English Prime Time and you are watching India Budget Special Discussion live with me, Anukriti Sharma. India's union budget is out, the first budget of Modi government's third term. The focus is on the fundamentals with an attempt to address the pressing challenges. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, and I quote, "It empowers all sections of the society." So what do we make of this budget? We've put together 4 prime highlights for you, and in this special episode, we will focus on jobs, undoubtedly the buzzword for today. Job creation is one of the biggest challenges that India faces right now, so the budget speech focused on that, and so did the budget allocations. The government will spend $24 billion on job creation in India over the next 5 years. The government will primarily focus on employment, skilling, MSMEs, and the middle class section of the society. Next will be education. Then next on the agenda are the NDA allies, the Telugu Desam Party or the TDP from Andhra Pradesh and the Janata Dal United or the JDU from Bihar. Andhra Pradesh and Bihar, these 2 states have got significant allocations. And finally, increase in the capital gains taxes. Both short-term and long-term investments from the stocks to land and properties have been affected. You'll now have to pay more on tax on your profits from these instruments. The government has hiked the capital gain taxes across the board. Obviously, the markets did not like it. Both the Sensex and the Nifty closed in the red day before yesterday. And now to facilitate this insightful discussion, we have Mr. Thomasgovathoti, who's the head of South Structured Finance and International Business, joining us live here at CVR English Newsroom. We welcome you, sir. How are you feeling today? We welcome you to the CVR News English Room for this special discussion on the India Budget 2024.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me here, and I'm good to see all of you here on the eve of the budget and the after discussion of the budget. Thank you very much for having me here.
So we looked at this entire speech which the finance minister gave, sir, day before yesterday. It was almost 86 minutes long and a lot of pointers came out. But out of all of those, there were some top highlights which really became the star highlights of that speech. Out of those, I have collected some special questions for you which I would like you to address. And I'm not just speaking on my behalf, I'm speaking on behalf of India, on behalf of the layman, on behalf of the Indian who wants to gain some key insights on these burning questions which are arising from the union budget.
Sure.
So to start, we are looking at the coalition. The coalition emerged as a major highlight of Sitaraman's speech day before yesterday. And we saw Telugu Desam Party or the TDP from Andhra Pradesh, which has been allocated a whopping amount of 15,000 crores for infrastructure development. And we also had the Janata Dal United from Bihar, which has been allocated funds of 26,000 crore rupees. And these allocations are significant allocations which have also created a lot of stir, murmur up until day before yesterday, which has now turned into full-fledged arguments, unverified claims and accusatory statements being made in the ongoing parliament discussions on the budget,
Sure.
where the non-NDA governments and the non-ruling parties are accusing the BJP with unverified claims. However, speaking of these two allies, the NDA allies, what are your thoughts, what are your insights on these developments from the budget, sir, the coalition?
Okay, let me start with a statement and let me elaborate on that statement. There can never be an economic stability without political stability. As students can relate to me better, there's something called linear programming. Linear programming is where you have a set of constraints. Given the constraints, what is the best thing that I can do? Everybody does it in our regular life.
Yes.
We have certain constraints and we take decisions which in the best interest of ourselves and people around me, depending on, at the same time I have certain constraints. A coalition government has certain constraints, and within that constraints, whatever the finance minister has done is in the best interest of the country. Why I say that? Because there can never be economic stability without political stability. If allies are not taken care, if political stability comes under question mark, there cannot be economic stability. The budget, one of the purpose of the budget is to have economic stability in the country. So, though the opposition can say whatever they want to say, they have the right to say in a democracy, but there cannot be an economic stability without political stability. Whatever the finance minister has done, has taken care that basic concept that the budget should bring in economic stability into the country. So, the entire coalition politics, of course, everybody in the country knows that there is coalition government and the government has to take care of the allies, but at the same time, the finance minister has done the best possible thing in the given circumstances, given the constraints that she has.
I completely agree with you, sir. That is absolutely an insightful approach. We need to look at the coalition as a positive step which has been taken towards the further development of the entire country, and not as an opportunity for the non-NDA states or the opposition ruling parties to start fighting in the parliament and start throwing accusatory comments to each other. It's more about a healthy discussion at this stage to understand the needs, and it's more about cooperation and collaboration with each other rather than competition with each other, that the non-NDA states have not gotten the support which the NDA allies have got, because ultimately it's about the development of the entire country overall, which is going to take place in the time to come.
Let me stick my neck out and make one more comment.
Absolutely, sir.
Had there been any other political party in place of BJP, do you think they could have done something different than what the finance minister has done?
In my opinion, this radical step which has been taken by the BJP, in my opinion, my
Sure.
humble opinion, no other party would have had the resource or the power or the radical nature to be able to take such a bold and a big step in such a positive direction. So the BJP, what the BJP has done in terms of the coalition decision, in my opinion, no other party might have been able to do that.
No, that's not my point. What I'm saying is, given the coalition government, we all know that there's a coalition government, given the situation, given the constraints, taking the economic stability of the country and the political stability of the country into consideration, had there been any other political party, would have done almost a similar kind of thing, if not the same thing. That's my point. Yeah.
Yes, if not more,
Correct.
They would have done the same thing probably in terms of coalition.
Correct. Whatever allocation that has been done to Andhra Pradesh, whatever allocation that has been done to Bihar is almost given. I know you need political stability to make sure that the country runs properly, and the outsiders, the people outside India are watching over, and for the last 10 years India is known for political stability, which is required for any other investor coming into India. The first thing that they look for is the country politically stable. When I invest 1 year, 2 years down the line, if the political party collapses and if some other government comes in with new policies, what happens to my money? I invested money into this country thinking that the previous government has certain policies.
Yes.
If that government doesn't exist anymore, what happens to my money? What happens to the policies based on which I invested my money?
True.
So political stability is extremely important for any investor, for any economic development of a country.
And ongoing political stability
Correct,
is important
correct.
regardless of the government in
Correct,
power.
correct. And why is it important? Because a political party which comes into power, they have some agendas,
Yes.
some economic policies, some social policies that are put in place based on which people invest into that country. And they expect, at least for the 5-10 years, those policies to continue.
Yes, long term.
Because I have taken a decision to invest so much money into this country depending on the policies that are presented to me at this point in time.
Yes.
I don't want those policies to change 1 year, 2 years down the line, which I have never anticipated. So that comes back to the whole point that political stability is extremely important to make sure that the country prospers economically.
Absolutely, sir. And because the political power game always comes into the picture in some way or the other, so a little bit of mudslinging here and there, a little bit of unverified claims and accusatory statements which are being made. But like you rightfully said, had there been some other party in power, they might have done the same thing, if not more. And in that case, some other party could have been targeted.
Sure, the Congress party ran coalition governments in the past.
Absolutely.
I'm sure the coalition government where there are more parties involved rather than just two allies. So I'm sure they know how coalition governments are run. But when you are in a specific position, you are in opposition, you have to play your role. You have to say certain things which you are expected to say.
Yes,
so
because you're in the opposition, so you oppose, but you do understand the significance and the importance of such a step which has been taken.
yeah, I'm not here criticizing any political party, but given again I come back to linear programming.
True.
The academic angle to it, given the constraints that Congress has, given the constraints that any party has,
party, yeah.
they are acting in the best interest of the people, working with them. So it all boils down to everybody playing their role.
Yes.
A healthy, strong opposition is required for the economic development of the country. It's good that opposition is getting stronger, which is actually good for the economic development of the country. Some policies taken by the ruling party have to be discussed, debated, questioned,
Yes.
and if there are any loopholes, they have to be rectified. For that, you need a strong opposition
For
party,
that, the opposition is required.
which is actually good. What is
Which is
happening
good.
in this Modi 3.0, whatever strength that the opposition gained, which is actually good for the economy,
Yes.
and we should welcome it. Whatever effort they are putting in to make sure that the economic policies are put in place, which is in the best interest of the country, that's good. Let everybody play their role in the best interest of the country, and at the end of the day, the country should get benefited.
True. If a healthy discussion can be ensured, then of course these healthy discussions can lead to the pointing out of the loopholes, like you said, and those can then be rectified. And of course, the ruling party stays on toes.
Sure.
And they do their job to the best of their ability. Moving on to my next agenda with you, sir, since you do belong to the banking sector.
Sure.
And keeping this current budget agenda on mind, how do you think that this current budget addresses the needs and the sentiments of the banking sector, the banking industry by and large?
See, the current problem that the banking industry is going through is the deceleration in the deposit mobilization. Deposit rate, the growth of deposits that banks are able to mobilize in the form of savings accounts and current accounts, which are supposed to be the cheapest funds for the bank,
Yeah.
the growth in those two sources of funds is going down. You know the reason why it's happening, which is actually there is a positive angle to it. People, especially the middle and the upper middle class of the society, they are withdrawing money from the savings accounts and investing in the capital markets, which is a good trend if that money is actually being invested rather than being used for speculative activities. If it's invested and it goes to right hands in the capital markets, it leads to the capital formation in the country.
Correct.
Which is a healthy sign.
Which is good, because now we are contributing to the growth of the country.
Correct. That money goes into capital expenditure of
Yes.
the companies to put up new factories,
Yes.
new infrastructure, which increases production, which increases the GDP growth.
The GDP growth.
So which is good. But the problem is some of that money according to some of the government agencies, significant part of that money is going to speculative activities.
Speculative activities such as?
Like futures and options, intraday trading, wherein especially the people in the age group below 30 years of age, apparently they are spending a lot of this money in intraday trading and futures and options, wherein 80% of the people lose money.
Oh.
Apart from that, you have long-term investors who put in money in stock market and wait for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and which is a good sign.
Which are the time-tested ways of investing money and multiplying money.
And those people are making money.
Those people will make money.
Money.
But these trends, these fads which come and go.
Sure.
So the younger generation of the country which is now trying to generate quick money.
Correct.
And in the name of quick money, they are getting into these trends. That is a dangerous trend which is now developing in the country.
Correct. The problem is when they lose money, when 80% of the people lose money, what would happen later is these people will get scared of the stock markets, any capital markets, and will never come back to the market.
That's the psychology at play here, negative psychology.
Correct. So, you know, the budget, the finance minister spoke about it, the SEBI chairman spoke about it, the RBI governor spoke about it. The speculative activity, the participation of the younger generation in the speculative activity in the form of F&O activity and short-term trading, intraday trading, that has to be reduced. For that, the government in the budget, they have increased the short-term capital gains from 15% to 20%, which is a good sign. You want to invest in the stock market, invest for the long term, which is good for the capital formation of the country, which is also good for your own self, because you make money when you invest in the stock market for the long term.
Because I was trying to read into the fine print as well, 15 to 20% for the short term, but 10 to 12% for the long term. So people could get more encouraged to go into long term investments in the capital gains market.
Yeah, it's 10 to 12.5%.
12.5 to be precise.
12.5%. I couldn't understand the logic behind increasing the long term capital gains. Short term capital gains is fully justified. You should discourage people to
get into the short term
trading activity. But long term capital gains, I'm not sure. It should not have been done. But people who have done are much more smarter. They would have thought a lot more before doing it. But let's not comment on that. But short term capital gains increase from 15 to 20% is welcomed. It would bring in some sanity and make sure that investments go from short term to long term, which is a good trend and healthy trend.
And the number that you mentioned, the percentage rather, that 80% of these younger generations will lose money in these activities that they indulge in, wherein they try to make quick money. That is quite a whopping percentage, quite a shocking percentage rather.
Correct.
And for the time being, I could say we can find solace in the fact that the increase from 10 to 12.5% in the long term investment is still less than 15 to 20% in the short term.
You would be surprised. Before 2018, the long-term capital gains was zero, and the market.
I'm rather surprised. Yes.
Yeah. So the market participants who are actually the regular investors, they are not happy with the long-term capital gains being increased.
True.
But as long as this money is going for nation building, Viksit Bharat, it's all good. And as when you are making money, 12.5% going into nation building and building of the infrastructure. In the GDP calculations, we do GDP growth rate is C plus I plus G plus X minus M.
Oh, that's a complicated formula. Yes. Quite a mouthful.
Yeah. So C in that is consumption. Off late, probably in the last 2 to 3 years, there has been talk that the consumption in the economy has been going down. So how do you improve consumption? There are two ways of improving the consumption. Either you reduce taxes or you put more money in the hands of the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there is a fiscal policy to put increase consumption, which is reducing the taxes. And the monetary policy is reducing the interest rates. But monetary policy would be done by the RBI, which is a different thing, not much related to budget that we are discussing right now. But when you reduce taxes, either the tax percentage or tinker with the slabs. That's what
Yes.
the finance minister has done.
Yes, like more money going into the pocket of the Aam Aadmi.
Correct. So when she increased the slabs, more money is going into the hands of the people, which hopefully would increase consumption.
Yes.
So the C part is taken care by tinkering with the slab rates.
True, sir.
In the income tax benefits that the finance minister tried to give to the public.
That is a very valid point made by you, because the common man will now probably spend more on goods and services and then again contribute to the GST collections of the nation.
Correct. The second part is C plus I plus G. G is the government spending. So the government, spends in the form of, the infrastructure spending. Lot of government spending goes into the developing the roads, the ports, the regular infrastructure that you see in the economy.
Yes, sir.
Which generates employment, and also that when people get employment,
Yes.
they get money again into their
Yes.
pocket. So that indirectly increases consumption again.
Yes, it increases the consumption again, and then the taxpayers are paying the taxes as
Correct.
well twice over. So
Correct.
the GST and the tax, it becomes a cycle
Correct.
of sorts.
Correct. And even in the government spending, there are two different ways government spends. One is the revenue expenditure,
Okay.
which goes into paying salaries of the government employees, which will have some effect in the short term, but the bigger effect will come from the capital expenditure. Capital expenditure is what I spoke about, the
Yes.
infrastructure building.
Yes, sir.
That will have a long-term effect.
Long term, yes.
Yeah, so the infrastructure, whatever you spend this year, will have a positive effect next 3, 4, 5, 6 years.
10, 20 years,
Correct,
over
correct.
decades, because more jobs, more employment, more growth, more GDP, more taxpayers
Correct.
in the picture, more GST collections, absolutely. Those are the positive, extremely long-term positive results which can be anticipated.
Yeah, there's one more macroeconomic concept that I wanted to discuss, which some of the students who studied economics and commerce students would understand.
I'm
There's
sure.
something called Laffer curve in macroeconomics.
Okay, so could you throw some light on that?
Yeah, Laffer curve looks like it's an inverted U-shaped curve.
Okay.
So on the x-axis you will have tax rate, and the y-axis you will have total tax revenue that the government collects. So Laffer curve basically says when you increase the tax rate to certain level, the tax revenue, total tax revenue for the government increases. But beyond certain point, the tax revenue actually goes down. Do you know why?
Interesting. Could you throw some light, sir?
Yeah, so basically when you increase tax rate beyond certain rate, people will avoid tax.
Absolutely.
They will find reasons, they find ways of doing things.
They'll
which-
find some tweaks to get around the
Correct,
taxes
correct,
and not
correct.
pay them if they are going to be so high.
Correct. So the Laffer curve, I'm trying to relate Laffer curve to the stock market.
Yes.
When these the taxes on the stock market are increased, I was thinking whether it would lead to there's something called dabba trade in stock market.
And what is this dabba trade, sir?
So dabba trade is basically you don't do your own trading.
Okay.
You ask somebody else to do it, and it doesn't go through the stock exchanges. So people avoid taxes completely.
Oh, these are rather interesting concepts that I'm getting introduced to through this interview with you today.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the youth is as well.
Yeah. So the Laffer curve applies in every tax
I'm sure.
environment.
Yes, sir.
To certain extent, when you increase taxes, the tax revenue, total tax revenue for the government increases. But beyond certain rate, when we try to increase the tax rate, the total tax collection for the government goes down because people will find ways and means of avoiding
Absolutely,
taxes.
they will. And this is a very interesting analogy that you have drawn with this curve, which could probably apply to the budget and the increase that has been applied to the long-term and the short-term capital gains taxes as well.
Correct.
Probably the curve could apply as well. Moving on, sir, speaking about the capital gains, so doubling down on that, both the short-term and the long-term taxes have been increased, which we've already discussed. And so basically, how does this budget affect the capital market ecosystem, the whole ecosystem of the country? And what are the sentiments of the investors? How are these investors going to get their money back or returns on their investments?
Well, everybody thinks that people who make money in the stock market are getting easy money. They are not working hard enough. They are getting money just by.
That's such a surface level, benign
Correct,
picture.
correct. But it doesn't require a lot of physical work, but it definitely requires a lot of mental work.
Mental work, yeah.
There's a lot of knowledge that goes into making money.
True.
So it's not like winning a lottery that
not at all.
you buy a ticket and you win money.
People at a distance might think that it is like that.
Correct,
It
correct.
looks like that. It's
Correct.
not like that.
Yeah, but in the last, especially post-COVID, people have made a decent amount of money in the stock market, which has come into the knowledge of people, the policy makers. And there is a perception that if we increase the taxes a little bit, they have anyway made lots of money. Let them contribute little to the development of the country. But the problem is, once the money doesn't come to the capital markets, the capital formation gets hurt in the economy. This money, when people start going and investing in land, investing in gold, which is another unproductive asset, you are not putting that money into productive use. When this money comes into the stock market, especially in the IPOs, in the primary markets, that money goes into the hands of the companies which are setting up new factories, which creates employment,
True.
which increases production, which will have a multiplier effect going forward. But if this money is not going into the cycle,
These productions, these
productive
real-time
activity,
productions.
productive activities, I'm hoping that this increase in small increase in taxes would not
Would not hamper that.
scare the investors from moving away from the stock market.
Yes.
But there has been, I was thinking that whenever this capital gains tax increases, the stock market would hit the lower circuit, but it didn't happen. It went down little bit on the budget day, but
Yes.
it recovered.
It recovered, yeah.
But I'm thinking that people will get adjusted to the new
This new budget
the
environment.
new normal. This new tax rates will become the new normal.
Yes,
A
sir.
few days here and there, life will move on and people will start making money again. And so one part of the market also thinks that as long as I make profit, giving part of the profit to the government for the development of the economy is not a bad idea.
Because the
But having said that,
yes, sir.
it's definitely not a positive sentiment to the market. At the same time, this is something that the market can live with
Can deal
and
with
move on.
in
Yeah,
the
it will
long term.
digest and move on.
We'll digest and move on and get acclimatized with it.
Correct, correct.
So, sir, looking at these long-term investments, which we are hoping that they continue in the long term, and then once we invest in land and property and setups, production setups and factories and industries, which obviously create more job opportunities for the youth and the unemployed of the country, which again leads to growth and GDP, again leads to more taxpayers and GST collections, which we are hoping for once the market gets acclimatized and the dust on this budget settles down. We are hoping that this happens. So speaking about productive activities, like you said, and productive activities can only happen when land is purchased, when buildings are created, and we need land for everything. We need land for jobs, we need land for even politics, we need land for power. So if these buildings and infrastructures can be uplifted and these production setups can be created, then obviously more job opportunities will be created.
Correct.
Now obviously India's GDP has definitely improved. China is about 5%, so India compared to China is very well placed. But looking at the current scenario with the budget, when it comes to the job market, because this is also directly linked to long-term investments which are related to capital gains taxes. If we are going into long-term investments which could lead to jobs, more jobs in India, the government has allotted $24 billion or 2 lakh crore Indian rupees, which are going into 3 new programs in terms of job creation. The first one is the paid part internship, where the government reassures that they are going to convince the top 500 companies to hire paid interns, wherein the interns are going to be paid rupees 5,000 every month and a one-time rupees 6,000 assistance from the company's CSR funds. The second one is a skilling scheme, which is basically a loan, and the loan is up to 7.5 lakhs. And the third one is an incentive plan of sorts, where the freshers are encouraged to join the workforce, and 15,000 rupees or the salary, whichever is higher, goes into their pension account. What are your thoughts on this financial breakdown, this allocation of funds to the further development of the job situation in the country and the GDP growth eventually?
Sure. Before I get to that point, let me, because you made a comparison of India and China. So India, of course, we are going at what, 7.5%, 7%, 7.5%?
Close to 7%.
If you say, I don't know what rate China is growing at, if you said 5%.
Post-COVID, India was at 8.2%, but then that was a different scenario because the pandemic had completely battered the Indian economy. So 8.2 was all about revival, but at this point we are close to 7%.
Sure. Yeah, but China is a $10 trillion economy, almost 3 times the size of.
That is another perspective.
Correct. Yes, so it's the base effect, growing, a young baby growing at a faster rate is expected. A grown-up man, adult man grows at a much slower rate.
That is
if you go
true.
to the US grows at 1.5%, 2%, 3%. 3% growth in the US is supposed to be extremely good growth rate because that economy is $25 to $30 trillion economy.
That is also correct. That is another way of looking at things, another perspective,
Yeah.
and a very valuable one.
So, though I'm not trying to take away anything from GDP growth rate in India,
True.
so we cannot compare that, China is growing at
True.
5%, we are growing at 7%.
Looking at the
so we are
size and
better.
the growth which China has already achieved.
So China had grown for almost 15-20% for, if I'm not wrong, 15 to 20 years continuously. The entire manufacturing revolution that happened in China,
Yes.
it became the manufacturing hub of the world.
Absolutely.
So there is one more concept, economic concept, that I should explain to you.
Sure, sir.
China exported deflation into the world. Do you know how it is done?
So I have no idea. Please throw some light on this.
Yes.
I'm sure our viewers wish to know about this.
Yeah, so what happened is China has set up huge manufacturing capacities. Okay, so when you set up huge manufacturing capacity, because of economies of scale, your per unit cost of production goes down a lot.
Drastically.
So if you are producing, for example, you are producing 100 cricket balls, for example's sake,
Yes, sir.
100 rupees per ball is the cost. But when you produce 1 lakh balls, that cost comes down to probably 30 rupees or 25 rupees.
Absolutely.
So the kind of capacities that China has put up has reduced the cost of production so much, and China started exporting these cheap goods to countries
To the world.
to the world.
Yes.
Because this China has been producing at a lower cost and exporting those goods to the US, the major consuming nation like the US, China has exported deflation. Had there been no China, there would have been huge inflation in the US and all over the world.
Now I understand this concept quite clearly.
Sure. So the people keep cursing China for various things that they have done, but one thing that people don't understand is they have brought down or kept the inflation of the world
Under control?
because of the cheap manufacturing that they have done for the world.
And the availability of goods across the world
Correct.
thanks to China.
Correct. So let us go back to Indian scenario.
Yes, sir.
Like,
Coming back to the India budget.
So when
Yes.
we were on the eve of independence, we talk of lot of things that the Britishers have done bad to the economy or how they plundered, but there are certain things, knowingly or unknowingly, those guys have done for the country, like
For the country,
setting
yes.
up the railways or most of those speak in English in India. Not many Chinese can do that.
True.
Thanks to the British.
English is spoken widely across the country.
Correct.
All the technological developments that we received, there was that initial momentum which we got from the
Correct.
Britishers.
The entire BPO industry which developed in India, the ITES, information technology enabled services, that happened because India has youth who can speak and understand English,
True.
which China could not do.
True.
Why the BPO industry was not prosperous, China could not compete with India in the BPO industry because they could not speak English. For the BPO industry to thrive, we need to have people who can speak and understand English.
And English is the global business language.
Correct. So I made this point because what the Britishers have
True,
done,
true.
they have done a lot of negative things to the country, but
we
there
might
are
criticize,
couple of
but
things that they
couple
have.
of things which have
Yeah.
been very productive for
So
our
I'm
country
trying
in the
to,
long term.
yeah, I'm trying to bring in comparison
Yes,
with
that
China.
analogy with China. I
Yeah,
understand.
So China has exported deflation to the world, brought down, temporarily kept inflation of the world under control.
Yes, sir.
So yeah, sorry,
So coming back to the GDP and the government's view on the GDP, which is definitely on the rise, and how the government further intends to continue to ensure that the growth or the GDP of the country is on the rise. These are the three plans which have been introduced as per the
Sure.
budget for this year
Sure.
up to 2025. What are your thoughts, sir? Do you think that these three new programs introduced by the government are going to go really far in implementing and executing the government's dream of having the GDP of the country soaring? Do you feel that these paid part internships are going to really be practical in the real term? Because thinking of top 500 companies across the country is okay, but assuring the youth of the country, making radical promises like these 500 top companies are going to eventually absorb 1 crore of Indian youth in the next 5 years. Now that's a radical promise to make. Is that going to be a possibility, or how far, if it is going to be a possibility, how far, to what extent will we be able to reach that dream or manifest it?
Okay, let me take an analogy from the medical profession. When there is a disease, there are two ways of treating the disease. Rather, you have to treat the disease in two ways. You go and attack the pathogen that is creating the disease, and you also treat the symptoms. Fever is a symptom which you put in whatever medicine, and you have to kill the pathogen as well for the disease to come under complete control. So employment generation is a good thing. You have to do it. This is like treating the symptom.
True.
But how do you make people eligible to take those jobs?
Absolutely.
For
That's the root cause.
The root cause is you have to create more education.
And upskilling programs.
Upskilling. So without education, if you create employment opportunities, the people should be skillful enough, the people should be educated enough to go and grab those jobs.
True.
So you have to first, develop education sector in the economy, create more schools, more colleges, which I'm sure the government is doing,
Yes.
but I'm talking in terms of a process.
Yes.
So the process is you develop youth who are more educated, who have the necessary skills, and then when the opportunities open, these guys are ready to go and
Yes.
grab those opportunities.
True.
But having said that, this is an extremely needed step taken in the right direction. Employment generation,
Yes.
unemployment is a problem that
It
all
is
over.
a problem.
All over.
Over 30% of India's youth is unemployed currently. So at least we can find solace in the fact that the government is now going to push funds into at least generating an opportunity for the youth to grab more jobs.
Sure.
Which brings me to my next point, sir, which you also mentioned, that job creation is one aspect in terms of the overall growth of the country's GDP. But what we really require is the killing of the pathogen, which means upskilling and further educating our youth.
Correct.
And keeping that in mind, the government has introduced this upskilling program wherein loans up to 7.5 lakhs can be availed by the youth. What are your thoughts on this skilling scheme?
I don't think anybody would find anything wrong with that thing.
Yes.
So it's obviously a good thing done in the right direction. But the devil is in the details. We have to see how this program gets implemented.
Yes.
And also the internship programs where the youth go and get the internships in the corporates, and the CSR funds are used. And everybody knows that the CSR funds are not optimally utilized. It's a known fact. But somebody has to bell the cat, come up with a policy where these funds are used for productive purposes. I think that whatever government has done, at least it's the first step. You have
It's
to
the
take
first
the
step.
and
At least the
as you
initiative
go on,
has been taken.
as you go on, you keep on doing the course correction. After 1 or 2 years, 3 years down the line, you will have all these CSR funds going for the proper purpose for which the government has started the program in the first place.
Absolutely. There's one issue which I would like to throw light on, sir, and then gain some insights from you. I also come from an education background, and I see a lot of youth of the country who do opt for these upskilling programs and these internships. And in some of the courses which are offered in universities like the MBA programs, these internships are actually compulsory, without which they can't complete their degrees and
Sure.
achieve them. However, I see masses by the ton going for these internships because they have to, without which
Sure.
they won't gain their degree, but they are not actually availing of these internships, not benefiting from them, not upskilling themselves through these practical hands-on training programs, and then eventually they end up not getting absorbed into the companies. Now this is a practical, real situation which I see with my own students all the time. It's heart-wrenching. What could be some possible solutions here, sir, in the practical aspect of executing these schemes, because they are looking very fancy on paper
Sure.
right now?
So I myself went through an internship program. So I passed out of IIM Bangalore, and internship I did in some MNC and in Bombay. And let me tell you, internship is a favor that corporates do to the students.
True.
A student passing out of first year MBA, let me stick my neck out and say, may not be useful at all to the company.
True.
So the companies still provide this internship with the intention that in a later day,
Yes.
whoever getting internship from them would come back and work for them and contribute.
Absolutely.
But an intern working for a corporate, I don't think any corporate expects any great work coming from them. So that's that is
and that's why, like you rightly said, it is a favor which the
Correct.
company is doing.
Correct. And and if the funds which are set aside for CSR, if that money is used for this internship, that's actually a better utilization of CSR funds for a purpose which solves the unemployment problem, and at the same time better channelization of the funds which are kept for productive purposes and the welfare of the society.
Absolutely, sir. And that brings me to the third part of the program which the government has introduced, the incentive plan, wherein the government promises that the first month's salary, 15,000 or the salary whichever is higher, goes into the freshers pension program. And a plan like this, an incentive like this has been introduced predominantly to push the freshers into the workforce so that they start working and then also eventually contribute to the growth of the country.
You tell me how many freshers in their first year job think of pension?
Think about it. I work, for example,
Sure.
as an assistant professor at a management institute.
Sure.
Now, I deal with these graduate and postgraduate program students all the time. Nobody is thinking about their pension.
Correct.
Everybody just wants the first job they can find, start making money, and they just tell me, ma'am, we want to leave the house and we want to start living our life and we want to earn money. No one is thinking about that pension plan at all. Not a single student have I come by so far.
I don't know
Think
what is
about
the
this.
thought process about
The
the
pension account,
but
yes.
I haven't seen the details. I rather not comment on it. But
I'm
for
not
me,
commenting either,
if
but I was a little surprised.
Correct.
Pension account?
for a fresher.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
That question mark came into my mind.
correct, but I don't know, maybe we have to study it further and understand what is the thought process that went into
True.
creating that pension concept for a fresher.
But again, my humble opinion, I don't see how far that would encourage a fresher to enter
Sure.
into the workforce. Which brings me to education again, because we were on the lines of jobs in education. Rupees 1.48 lakh crores for education, employment and upskilling has been allocated by the government this year. And although, sir, rupees 1.48 lakh crores, it's a big sum, a whopping sum, it's more of a surface level big print. If we get into the fine print of this, the first question which comes to the masses, where will this money go? Who will this money go to? And who are the end beneficiaries? And if the end beneficiaries are the students who are getting upskilled, what is the execution or the implementation route going to look like?
Yeah, that's why I made this comment that the devil is in the details. We
Yes.
have to study it further. Is it only for educated youth or is it for semi-skilled youth, skilled youth, is it for vocational training? We have to see those details and make comments. I am sure those things are thought about.
Yes.
The fine print would have those details, but a lot more clarity is required in
Yes.
those things.
Because sometimes when I speak with HR professionals, the general managers of the HR departments, they mention that the courses which are being offered by colleges and universities are now becoming more and more outdated.
Sure.
And more upskilling programs are required, more industry oriented programs are required, where students are given an opportunity for practical hands-on training.
Sure.
Students are becoming book smart by the ton. They have been taught by the book for decades and decades.
Sure.
Now the industries are saying we don't have a need for such students, for example, for such MBA graduates anymore. In fact, the global news is all over the place, and I'm sure you've heard of it. The USA is constantly opposing these universities that are manufacturing MBA graduates by the ton.
Sure.
They're book smart,
Sure.
but the companies are complaining they're not street smart. So where is this hands-on practical training? Where are the students gaining these trainings from? That is missing.
Yeah, most of these management institutes, at least the good ones, they follow the case study method.
Yes.
They take up the real world case.
The IIMs do, the IITs
Yes.
do, the top institutions.
Sure, yeah. So that is one way of, they, at the same time, education institutions also have their own constraints. There are
True.
certain things that they
Again,
can do,
yes.
there are certain things they cannot do.
Infrastructural constraints, for
Correct,
example.
correct. Given whatever constraints they are going through, the case study method of education that happens in some of the very good education
Which I
institutions
agree
in
with,
India
yes.
is an attempt to make sure that the students are solving the real world problems rather than
Yes.
just knowing the concepts.
At least getting exposed to them.
Correct, correct. The case study method, you give a
Yes.
real world case. If you are the manager, how will you solve it?
True.
And a group of people are put together in a room, and they were it's a simulated environment of an organization. One is an HR manager,
Yes.
other one is a marketing. How do you resolve
True,
issues between the departments? Those are certain things that the education institutions, I'm sure, doing to make sure that the curriculum is practical to the extent possible.
As much as is possible.
Correct,
Case
correct.
studies, role plays and simulations,
correct.
which of course, like you said, the top institutions are introducing more and more into the curriculums of the students.
Correct, correct.
So the fine print, like Sir said, yes, the devil lies in the details. We have to wait and watch. Like the HR professionals are also saying across the country, when it comes to the job and the education scenario, it is more of a wait and watch situation to understand how much of these youth are getting further upskilled beyond the books to become eligible, like Sir said, becoming eligible for these jobs which are being offered to the 1 crore youth of the country. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us live at our CVR English newsroom for such an insightful discussion on the Indian Budget 2024. And thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you for having
To
me.
our viewers who are watching us live from their homes, keep watching CVR English for further details on the Union Budget 2024.
I think I think it went okay. We didn't screw up anything.
It was rather I learned about a lot of things like the